My sister got pregnant by my husband. And somehow, I was the one everyone blamed. The night they told me, my entire family was sitting at the dinner table like we were about to celebrate something. My mother had cooked my favorite meal. My father poured wine. My younger sister, Emily, wouldn't stop smiling. Then she stood up, placed a hand on her stomach, and said the words that destroyed my marriage. "I'm pregnant." I remember forcing a smile. "Congratulations," I said. Then she added softly, "It's Daniel's." Daniel, my husband. The room went silent. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate so loudly it sounded like a gunshot. But what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was what my mother said next. "Sofia, she's younger. Don't ruin her future." That was the moment I realized something terrifying. My sister had stolen my husband, and my family had chosen her. My name is Sofia Carter, and until 2 years ago, I believed my life was stable. Not perfect, but stable. I was 31 and living in Chicago, working as a marketing director at a small company I had helped build from the ground up. The hours were long, but I loved what I did. I loved the feeling of building something that belonged to me. And at the center of my life was my husband, Daniel. Daniel and I had been married for 4 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 27. He had this easy charm about him, the kind that made everyone feel comfortable within minutes of meeting him. He remembered small details about people, laughed at the right moments, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. For a long time, I believed I had chosen the right person. We bought a modest condo together near downtown Chicago. Nothing luxurious, but it was ours. We spent weekends exploring coffee shops, arguing over what movie to watch, and occasionally talking about the future kids, maybe moving to a bigger place someday. It felt like a normal life. And then there was my younger sister, Emily. Emily was 8 years younger than me. Growing up, she had always been the center of attention. My parents called her the free spirit. Teachers called her distracted. Friends called her fun. I called her exhausting, but she was still my sister. After she dropped out of college at 21, my parents didn't push her too hard. They said she needed time to figure things out. She bounced between part-time jobs, waitressing, retail, event hosting, but nothing ever lasted very long. About a year before everything collapsed, Emily started coming over to my place more often. At first, it seemed harmless. She'd show up on Friday nights with takeout and wine, flop onto the couch, and complain about work or dating or whatever drama was happening in her life that week. Daniel didn't seem to mind. In fact, he seemed to enjoy having her around. They joked with each other constantly. Sometimes they teased me about how serious I was about work. "Relax, Sofia," Emily would laugh. "Not everything is a business meeting." Daniel would grin and add, "She schedules fun like it's a project deadline." Back then, I laughed too. I thought it was normal. Looking back now, I realized there were small things that should have made me uncomfortable. Moments that, at the time, I brushed off without thinking. Like the night I came home late from work and found the two of them in the kitchen laughing over a bottle of wine. Emily was leaning against the counter, Daniel standing closer to her than I expected. They both looked up when I walked in. "Oh, hey," Emily said quickly. Daniel smiled, but something about it felt stiff. "Just finishing the wine you left," he said. I remember feeling a strange flicker of irritation, but I told myself it was nothing, because that's what trust does. It convinces you that the people closest to you would never be capable of hurting you. And Emily was my sister. Daniel was my husband. The idea that they could betray me together wasn't just unlikely. It was unthinkable. At least, until that dinner at my parents' house. 3 days before that dinner, my mother called me. "Sofia, your father and I are making dinner on Sunday," she said cheerfully. "You and Daniel should come." That wasn't unusual. My parents loved hosting family dinners, especially on Sundays. It was one of those traditions they insisted kept the family close. "Sure," I said. "What time?" 6 o'clock. "And Emily will be there too." I hesitated for half a second. Emily had been distant lately. She hadn't come over to our condo for almost 2 weeks, which was unusual for her. Normally, she was around constantly. "Okay," I said finally. Looking back, that phone call feels strange now, like the calm before a storm. Sunday evening, Daniel and I drove to my parents' house just outside the city. The moment we walked in, something felt wrong. The air in the house was heavy, like everyone had already been arguing before we arrived. My father was standing near the kitchen counter, staring at his phone. My mother was setting plates on the table, but her movements were tense. And Emily was sitting in a chair by the window. She didn't jump up to hug me the way she usually did. She just looked at me, quietly. "Soph," she said. I frowned. "Hey." Daniel walked past me and greeted my parents. "Good to see you," he said. My mother forced a smile. "You too, Daniel." The whole scene felt unnatural, like we were actors waiting for someone to say their lines. Dinner started awkwardly. We sat around the table eating roast chicken and vegetables while nobody really talked. My father asked Daniel a few questions about work. My mother commented on the weather. Emily barely touched her food, and every few minutes, she glanced at Daniel. Finally, halfway through the meal, she pushed her chair back. "I need to say something," she said. Everyone went still. My mother immediately looked nervous. "Emily," she started, but Emily ignored her. She stood up slowly and placed one hand on her stomach. Then she said the words that split my life into two pieces. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, my brain didn't process it. Pregnant. My first reaction was automatic. "Oh," I said, forcing a smile. "Congratulations." Emily didn't smile back. Instead, she looked at Daniel. Then she said softly, "It's his." I blinked. "His?" She nodded toward my husband. "Daniel." The room went silent. My heart started pounding in my chest. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to laugh. To say this was some kind of misunderstanding. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even look at me. He just stared down at the table. That's when the truth crashed over me. "No," I whispered. Emily swallowed. "We didn't plan for it to happen like this." My chair scraped against the floor as I stood up. "You're joking," I said. Nobody answered. My father rubbed his forehead. My mother looked like she might cry, and Daniel still hadn't said a single word. "How long?" I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Emily hesitated. Then, she said quietly, "Almost a year." A year. My fork slipped out of my hand and hit the plate with a sharp clang that echoed through the dining room. A year. While he was sleeping next to me every night. While she was coming over to my house every weekend. While I was cooking dinner for both of them. My stomach twisted. "You're lying," I said. Emily shook her head slowly. Daniel finally spoke. "Sofia." That was it. Just my name. No explanation. No apology. Just my name. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. For a few seconds, nobody moved. I stood there staring at the three people I had trusted the most in the world. My husband, my sister, my parents. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "You've been sleeping with my husband for a year," I said slowly. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Like this. As if there was a version of this betrayal that would have been acceptable." I turned to Daniel. "Is she telling the truth?" He finally looked at me and nodded. Just a small, quiet nod. "Yes." That single word shattered the last piece of denial inside me. I felt my hands start to shake. "You're my husband," I whispered. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't expect things to get this serious. I stared at him in disbelief. "This serious?" I repeated. "She's pregnant, Daniel." Before he could respond, Emily suddenly burst into tears. "I know I messed up," she cried. "I know this looks terrible, but I didn't plan this." My mother immediately stood up and rushed to her side. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, wrapping her arms around Emily. "Sweetheart." I felt something inside my chest tighten painfully. My father sighed heavily and folded his hands on the table. "We need to calm down," he said. "Calm down." I laughed once, a short, hollow sound. "You want me to calm down?" My voice was getting louder now. "My sister just told me she's pregnant with my husband's baby." "And you want me calm?" My father raised a hand. "Sofia, shouting won't help." Emily wiped her face dramatically. "I didn't want you to find out like this." I stared at her. "How exactly did you plan to tell me?" I asked. "Send a baby shower invitation?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sofia, please." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to say my name like that." Silence fell again. Then my mother said the sentence that would change everything. "Sofia. She's younger." I blinked. "What?" "She's only 23. My mother continued carefully. "She made a mistake. A mistake. Sleeping with my husband for a year. Getting pregnant. Destroying my marriage. And my mother called it a mistake." My father cleared his throat. We're not saying what happened is right. But? I asked. But ruining Emily's life won't fix this. Ruining Emily's life. I felt like I was watching a surreal movie. You think I'm the one ruining lives here? I said slowly. Emily looked at me with watery eyes. Soph, please don't make this harder than it already is. Harder. I stared at her in disbelief. You slept with my husband. You got pregnant. And you think this is hard for you? She started crying again. My mother shot me a disapproving look. Sophia, don't attack her. Attack her. That word echoed in my head. Daniel finally spoke again. We didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at him. You didn't mean to hurt me. You've been lying to me for a year. You've been sleeping with my sister. And you didn't mean to hurt me. My father leaned forward. Think about the baby, he said quietly. The baby. That was the moment everything became clear. My parents weren't neutral. They had already chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. Emily sniffled. Soph, you're strong, she said softly. You'll recover. Recover. Like my life was a broken chair. Something you throw away and replace. I felt strangely calm all of a sudden. Cold. Detached. So let me get this straight, I said. My husband cheats on me with my sister. She gets pregnant. And your solution is for me to… what? My mother avoided my eyes. We need to support Emily right now. Of course they did. She was younger. Pregnant. Fragile. And I was the older sister. The one expected to sacrifice everything. My father nodded slowly. You're the bigger person, Sophia. That was the moment I understood something terrifying. I wasn't losing just my husband. I was losing my entire family. Because they had already decided. They chose her. Something inside me went completely quiet after my father said that. Not peaceful. Just… empty. I looked around the table one last time. My mother was still holding Emily like she was the victim. Emily was crying into her hands. Daniel stared at the floor like a man waiting for a storm to pass. And my father kept looking at me as if I were the one about to cause a problem. That's when I realized something important. They had already rewritten the story. In their version, Emily had made a mistake. Daniel had gotten confused. And I was supposed to be the mature one who handled it gracefully. I slowly picked up my purse from the chair. Daniel looked up. Sophia. Wait. No, I said calmly. My voice surprised even me. There was no anger in it anymore. Just certainty. I looked directly at my husband. We're getting divorced. The words landed on the table like a final verdict. Emily stopped crying. My mother gasped. Daniel blinked. Sophia, don't make a decision like this tonight, my father said. I almost laughed. You mean the decision that my husband already made a year ago? Daniel stood up suddenly. Can we talk privately? There's nothing left to discuss. Sophia, you slept with my sister. The room went silent again. I think the conversation is pretty clear. For a moment, Daniel looked like he might argue. But then he sighed. And nodded. Okay. Just like that. 4 years of marriage ended with one word. Okay. I walked toward the door. Behind me, my mother called out. Sophia, please don't do something you'll regret. I stopped for a second. Then I turned around. You're right, I said quietly. I regret trusting all of you. And then I left. The divorce moved faster than anyone expected. Mostly because I didn't fight it. Daniel moved out of our condo within a week. We communicated through lawyers after that. There were no emotional speeches. No dramatic confrontations. Just paperwork. But there was one detail Daniel didn't seem to remember. When we got married, I had insisted on a prenup. At the time, it had been a practical decision. Before meeting Daniel, I had helped launch a small marketing startup with 2 friends. Back then, it wasn't worth much. Just an ambitious idea and a lot of late nights. Daniel had laughed when we signed the agreement. You really think this company will be worth millions someday? He joked. I believe it will, I told him. And he had shrugged. Fine. If you're ever rich, it'll still be your money. Neither of us expected those words to matter. But now they did. Because in the 4 years of our marriage, the company had grown. A lot. When Daniel's lawyer reviewed the prenup, the reaction was immediate. The contract was airtight. Everything related to my company was mine. Completely. Daniel wasn't entitled to a single dollar. The day the divorce was finalized, he called me. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I was. But to ask one question. Are you serious about the prenup? Yes. You're really leaving me with nothing? I paused for a second. Then I answered honestly. You left me first. The line went quiet. Then he hung up. 2 weeks later, Emily moved in with him. My parents said it was temporary. For the baby, my mother explained when she called. Apparently, the two of them were trying to build a real family now. I listened silently while she spoke. She expected me to argue, or cry, or beg them to reconsider everything. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I just said, I hope it works out for them. Then I ended the call, because while everyone else thought the story was over, mine was only beginning, and the next chapter was something none of them saw coming. For the first few months after the divorce, my life felt strangely quiet, not peaceful, just different. For the first time in years, my home was completely mine. No unexpected visits from Emily. No awkward conversations with Daniel about bills or weekend plans. Just silence. At night, I sometimes sat on the balcony of my condo overlooking the Chicago skyline and wondered how everything had unraveled so quickly. 4 years of marriage, gone in a few weeks. But while my personal life was collapsing, my professional life was doing the opposite. The company I had helped start Brightwave Marketing was growing faster than any of us expected. We had landed 3 major national clients that year, and our small team of 12 had suddenly expanded to almost 50 employees. I threw myself into work, not to escape the pain, but because building something gave me control again. And control was the one thing I had lost when my marriage fell apart. About 6 months after the divorce, something happened that changed everything. One morning, my business partner Marcus called an emergency meeting. When I walked into the conference room, he was practically vibrating with excitement. "You need to sit down," he said. "That bad?" I asked. "No," he grinned. "The opposite." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal from a technology company based in San Francisco. They wanted to acquire Brightwave. Completely. I stared at the number printed on the last page. $38 million. For a moment, I thought it had to be a typo. "This is real?" I asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "They've been watching our growth for almost a year." My heart started pounding. This would change everything. Exactly. 2 months later, after negotiations and endless legal meetings, the deal was finalized. Brightwave was sold. And suddenly, the little company I had once built on late nights and borrowed laptops had turned into something much bigger. Financially, my life was secure. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Emily. I certainly didn't tell Daniel. But news like that doesn't stay quiet for long. A local business magazine published an article about the acquisition. The headline read, "Chicago marketing firm sold for $38 million. And my name was right there in the middle of the story. The phone calls started the next morning. My mother was the first. "Sofia, why didn't you tell us?" I leaned back in my chair. "Tell you what?" "About the company. The sale. We had to read about it online." I said nothing. She continued quickly. "We're proud of you, sweetheart." The sudden affection in her voice made my stomach twist. 6 months earlier, I had been the daughter they expected to sacrifice everything. Now I was the successful one, the one with money. I ended the call politely. Then the text started. Emily sent a short message. "Wow. Congrats." No apology. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just congratulations. And then there was Daniel. He called 12 times in one afternoon. I ignored every single one. But a week later, he showed up anyway. At my office. When my assistant told me he was waiting in the lobby, I almost laughed. Some people never change. I walked downstairs slowly. Daniel looked different. Thinner. More tired. The confident charm he used to carry so easily seemed faded. "Sofia," he said. "What do you want, Daniel?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You had a year to talk while you were cheating on me." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yes," I said. "You do." For a moment he just stood there, staring at the floor. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Emily and I aren't together anymore." That caught my attention. "What?" He laughed bitterly. "She left." "Left?" 3 months ago." I raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "She met someone online." I blinked. "You're joking." I wish I were. Apparently Emily had taken some of their savings, packed a bag and disappeared. Just like that. After everything she had destroyed to be with him. Daniel shook his head slowly. "I thought she loved me." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said quietly, "She loved the excitement." And suddenly, for the first time since that dinner at my parents' house, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. because the man who had once been the center of my world now looked like a stranger standing in my office lobby. And the sister who had stolen my marriage had already moved on to the next disaster. But Daniel hadn't come just to tell me that. I could see it in the way he kept glancing at the article about the company's sale on his phone. The real reason he was there was about to become very obvious. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Daniel stood in the middle of the lobby, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, like he wasn't sure how to start the conversation. But I already knew. People don't show up at their ex-wife's office after ignoring her for months just to share life updates. They come because they want something. Finally, he cleared his throat. I know things ended badly between us. That's one way to describe it, I replied. He forced a weak smile. I'm not here to reopen old wounds. Then why are you here? He hesitated. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me the article about the company sale. So, congratulations, he said. I said nothing. I mean it, he continued quickly. That's incredible. $38 million is huge. I crossed my arms. Get to the point, Daniel. He sighed. I'm not doing great right now. There it was. I lost the apartment after Emily left, he continued. My job cut hours. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but, he looked straight at me. I was hoping maybe you could help. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. Help you? Yeah, he said carefully. Just temporarily. I laughed. Not loudly. Just one, quiet, disbelieving breath. You cheated on me with my sister for a year. Yes. You got her pregnant. Yes. You destroyed our marriage. His eyes dropped. Yes. And now you're asking me for money. He winced. When you say it like that, that's exactly how it happened. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible decisions. But Sofia, we were married for 4 years. That has to mean something. I stared at him. It does, I said calmly. It means I learned exactly what kind of person you are. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything else, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Of course, I answered. What is it? Her voice came through immediately, anxious and hurried. Sofia, Daniel told us he was going to see you. I looked at him. He avoided my eyes. You're seriously calling them about this? I said quietly. My mother continued speaking as if she hadn't heard me. He's going through a difficult time right now. Mom, I said slowly, are you asking me to help my ex-husband financially? Well, yes. I almost laughed again. You defended him when he cheated on me with Emily. That situation was complicated. It wasn't complicated. She was pregnant, and he was my husband. My mother's voice softened. Sofia, you're doing well now. You have more than enough. So, that was the logic. Because I had money now, my pain didn't matter anymore. You want me to support the man who betrayed me. He's still family. No, I said firmly. He isn't. But he's the father of your niece or nephew. I closed my eyes for a moment. You mean Emily's child? Yes. But, Mom, I interrupted. You chose her. Silence. You chose her the night she admitted everything. You told me not to ruin her future. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Daniel stood there awkwardly while I spoke. My mother finally said quietly, You're the bigger person, Sofia. That phrase again. The bigger person. It had followed me for months. It meant, sacrifice quietly so everyone else stays comfortable. I looked at Daniel. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm not the bigger person anymore, I said. Then I hung up. The lobby went completely silent. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. So, that's a no? I stepped closer to him. Yes, I said calmly. It's a very clear no. For a second, he looked like he might argue. Then his shoulders sagged. I guess I deserved that. Yes, I replied. He turned toward the exit. Halfway to the door, he stopped and looked back. You know, he said quietly, Emily said you'd react like this. I raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? He shrugged. She said you'd always choose pride over family. I watched him for a long moment. Then I said something that made him freeze. You might want to call Emily. Why? Because if she thinks I'm the villain in this story. I paused. She hasn't seen what happens next. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? But I didn't answer. Because the truth was, the next chapter of this story wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. And those consequences were already starting to catch up with everyone involved. About 2 months after Daniel showed up at my office, I thought the chaos had finally ended. I had blocked his number. My parents had stopped calling as often. Emily had disappeared again, no texts, no messages, nothing. For the first time in a long while, my life felt steady. Work was going well. I had started mentoring a group of young women through a nonprofit program our company sponsored, and I was slowly rebuilding routines that had nothing to do with my old marriage. Then, one evening, around 8 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I froze. Emily was standing there. She looked completely different from the last time I had seen her. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red and swollen like she hadn't slept in days. And in her arms was a baby. For a second, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Sofia, please." I leaned against the doorframe. "What are you doing here?" Her voice shook. I didn't know where else to go. I stared at the baby carrier. The little girl inside was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the storm surrounding her life. "What happened to Daniel?" I asked. Emily swallowed. "He kicked me out. That surprised me." "You left him." "I came back," she said quickly. But things weren't the same. I crossed my arms. Imagine that. Emily looked like she might cry again. "I made mistakes, okay?" "I know that. Mistakes." The word sounded so small compared to everything she had done. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She hesitated. "I need help." Of course she did. "What about Mom and Dad?" "They said I need to figure things out myself." For a moment, I almost laughed. The golden child had finally been cut off. Emily shifted the baby in her arms. "I can't do this alone," she said quietly. I looked down at the little girl again. She couldn't have been more than a few months old. Her tiny hand moved slightly as she slept. And suddenly I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness, not sympathy for Emily, but concern for the baby. None of this was her fault. She didn't choose her parents. She didn't choose the chaos she had been born into. Emily must have seen the change in my expression. "Sofia," she whispered, "please. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything between us." That's an understatement. But she deserves better. She gently adjusted the blanket around the baby. She deserves stability. The word hung in the air. Stability. The same thing I had lost the night my sister stood at my parents' dinner table and announced she was pregnant with my husband's child. For a long moment, I said nothing. Emily looked at me with desperate hope. "I'll do anything," she said. "Anything." Finally, I stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," I said. Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, Sofia. I promise I'll—" "Stop," I interrupted. She blinked. "I didn't say I was going to save you." Her expression faltered. "Then what?" "I'm going to help the baby." Emily went silent. I walked into the living room and gestured for her to sit down. She lowered herself onto the couch carefully, still holding the baby. I sat across from her. "You want help?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "Yes." "Then you're going to earn it." Confusion crossed her face. "What do you mean?" I stood up and walked to my desk. Inside one of the drawers was a folder. I brought it back and placed it on the coffee table between us. Emily looked down at it. "What's this?" "A contract." She frowned. "For what?" I sat down again. "My company runs a training program," I explained. "We help single parents learn remote marketing and digital management skills." Emily stared at me. "You're serious?" "Yes." "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." I tapped the folder. "If you want my help, you join the program." Her eyes widened. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work for your own life." She looked stunned. "There's training," I continued calmly. "Childcare support. Job placement opportunities. But it's not easy." "How long?" "A year." Emily leaned back, overwhelmed. "A year?" "Yes." "And if I quit?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Then I walk away." The room was quiet for several seconds. Emily looked down at the baby again. Her daughter stirred slightly but didn't wake. Finally, Emily whispered, "You're serious about this?" "Completely." She swallowed hard. For the first time since she had shown up at my door, she didn't look like the reckless younger sister who thought life would always fix itself. She looked like someone standing at the edge of reality. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like the future might finally belong to me again. Emily started the program 2 weeks later. The first few months were rough for her. Very rough. The training wasn't glamorous. It meant early morning online classes, learning digital marketing tools she had never used before, and completing projects with strict deadlines. There were also weekly counseling sessions designed to help participants rebuild confidence and stability. More than once, Emily looked like she was ready to quit. One evening, she called me. "I don't think I can do this," she said. "You can," I replied calmly. "I've never done anything like this before." That's the point. Silence hung on the phone. Then she sighed. "Why are you even helping me?" I thought about that question for a moment. "Because your daughter deserves a mother who can stand on her own feet." Emily didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I'm trying." And for the first time in her life, she actually was. A year passed faster than I expected. Emily finished the program. Not perfectly, not easily, but she finished. Through the program, she secured a remote position with a mid-sized marketing agency based in Austin. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was stable, and for the first time, she had consistent income. She moved into a small apartment outside Chicago, just her and the baby. Her daughter's name was Lily. At first, our interactions stayed strictly professional. Emails about schedules, updates about training sessions, occasional progress reports. We rarely talked about the past. Some wounds take longer to process than a year. But something slowly began to change. Emily stopped acting like the center of the world. Responsibility has a way of doing that. Late nights with a crying baby. Bills that must be paid. Work deadlines that can't be ignored. Life had finally started teaching her the lessons my parents never did. My relationship with my parents, however, remained distant. They called occasionally, trying to reconnect. But trust, once broken, doesn't repair overnight. Sometimes my mother would ask carefully, "Have you seen Emily lately?" "Yes," I would answer. "How is she doing?" "She's working," my father once said quietly. "You did more for her than we ever did." I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because I didn't want to reopen old arguments. Some things are better left in the past. 3 years after the night that destroyed my marriage, my life looked completely different. I had moved to a larger apartment closer to the lake. My work had expanded into mentoring programs for women starting businesses. The company's sale had given me the financial freedom to invest in projects that actually mattered. And Emily? Emily was still working. Still raising Lily. Still learning what responsibility looked like. We weren't close. We probably never would be again, but we were no longer enemies. Sometimes Emily would bring Lily to the park near my apartment. The little girl would run toward me with a huge smile. "Aunt Soph." She always said it like it was the best word in the world. Every time I heard it, something inside me softened just a little. Not toward Emily, but toward the future. One afternoon, while Lily was playing on the swings, Emily sat beside me on a bench. She watched her daughter for a while before speaking. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I didn't answer immediately, because apologies don't erase history, but they do matter. Finally, I nodded. "I know." She looked relieved. "I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." "That's not how life works," I said. She frowned. "Then how does it work?" I looked at Lily laughing on the playground. "You build something better from what's left." Emily followed my gaze. For a long time, neither of us spoke. If you had told me years ago that my sister would have a child with my husband, I would have thought it was the end of my world. And for a while, it was. But life has a strange way of moving forward. People betray you. Families break. Trust collapses. Yet somehow, new paths still appear. Not because the past disappears, but because you choose what to build after the damage. My sister once stole my marriage. My family once chose her over me. But today, those decisions no longer control my life. Because the most powerful thing you can do after betrayal is build a future that belongs entirely to you. And sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to let someone else's mistakes define your story.